Hey everyone, so as promised, I wanted to do a little bit of kind of a vlog video on me designing a new colorway, and so that's what we're going to be doing today. We're out here in my studio. I do dye in my backyard. I'm under a canopy with a tarp on it, which I know probably is a little bright, and I actually might need to adjust some of the camera settings here so it's not too bright, which I love that I can do on the fly, by the way. A bee just landed in my, I don't know, there's a bee. It landed in my water. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be designing a new colorway, and this colorway is going to be for my local yarn store. So Vegas already has the Vegas Golden Knights, which is our, I guess, NHL hockey team. Like we have like if there's Major League and Minor League Baseball, there's like Major League Hockey and Minor League Hockey, I guess. So Henderson, which is actually where I live, which is kind of a suburb of Vegas, we actually now have our own hockey team, and it's called the Silver Knights, I think. Silver Knights. So I'm designing a colorway for that team at the request of my local yarn store owner. So hold on, I'm gonna fish this bee out. This poor bee. Is this the same? This has happened before. This might be the same bee. Here, buddy. Dry off and go pollinate a flower. Good. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is I'm just going to be kind of walking through. This is not really a tutorial. This is just kind of me and my ideas and how we're going. So I've got my yarn hanging up over here, and I've got the dye colors and everything that I want here on the table. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about mixing and everything like that, and then the crux of this, or I guess the majority of this, will be showing you kind of how I come up with, or how I use different techniques to kind of get a look I'm going for. And part of this today is I actually don't exactly know what I'm going for. I know kind of where I want to start, and then it's going to be kind of an interesting process from there, because I'm trying to think about how I want to portray these colors on these skeins. And the great thing about these skeins is these are actually practice skeins. These are not my normal bases that I use for selling. These are actually what came from Knit Crate, and I said that I would use those because these are a little bit short on yardage, but luckily the content of the yarn is pretty much the same as what I use, so when I have to vary it for my actual skeins, it won't vary too much. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some citric acid and some dye to a jar, and we're going to kind of measure it out for the 3 skeins that we have, and then we'll go from there. Alright, the water doesn't look hot yet, but it is. It's just because it's warm out here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to take our skeins, we're going to put them in the dye pot. We're actually going to put them in dry, and with the citric acid that's in, it's going to pull through the skein, and so a lot of the dye is actually going to be on the bottom parts of the skein, and then the top parts will be lighter, and then we're going to play with a little bit more color after that soaks in. Now the important thing here is that we let the skeins sit and absorb the water naturally, and that way it's going to pull everything through instead of just trying to shove the skein in, because we want parts of the skein to take up more dye than the other parts of the skein. So we want this variation to allow to sit. So we're just going to let this kind of soak in, and you can actually sit here and see that that's already happening quite a bit. Once it has kind of sunk in, we can finally kind of push everything down to make sure that it's wet and spread out. But for now, we're just going to let it pull the dye through. So the important thing to do now is we're just going to let this sit for about 25 minutes, and we're just going to let it soak up the dye as much as possible. We're just going to let it absorb and stick to the skeins. The citric acid is going to act as the mordant, and everything's going to kind of solidify and stay in place. So in about 25 minutes, we'll come back, check it out, and see where we want to go from there. Okay, so it's been 25 minutes and the yarn is soaked in, so you can take a look here. So everything has soaked in pretty well, and so now what we're gonna do, now what we're gonna do is, so actually I guess I should explain what colors we're working with here. So silver gray is the first color. The second color, because the logo is really just black and silver or black and gray. If you can hear my dogs barking in the background, it's because they probably see a person. I'm the only house in my neighborhood that's backyard is bordered by a fence and not a wall, so they can see all the way across the main street that I'm next to. So the logo is mainly black and silver, but there's also like the eyes of the logo, because I believe the logo's a horse. They're a gold, almost like a brown metallic color. So I have some golden straw that we're gonna do for that. But really the only two colors are black and silver, so that's not much to work with. And then the eyes are kind of their own thing. I thought about leaving a little bit of the white in there because when they spell out the name, it's more of like a really light gray. So if I leave some of the bare white in here, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I don't want to be too overbearing with the black. The black is the majority of the logo, but I feel like black is just... Not a lot of people like working with black yarn, and it's kind of an accent, really, and I kind of want to stick to that. So what we're gonna do is, I think what I'm gonna do is I want to put some black maybe in the middle of the skeins or on one end. I kind of want to put it though where there's not like kind of, let's see, let me reposition this for you. So there's areas here towards the front that you can't see, and some areas here towards the back where there's a little bit less gray on the skeins. And I think what I want to do is either put the black in that area or this area to cover up some of the white, but I want to leave some of the white also to where I can put in some of these gold speckles and they're going to show through. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do black on one end, and then we're going to do speckles. The other thing I want to do is at some point I want to flip this yarn and kind of see what the underside looks like. We might be able to do it. Yeah, see, it's pretty soaked up. It's pretty well soaked up on the other side. So we also may just end up exclusively working on this side, since it can be a little bit more fun. So I think what I'm going to do for black is I really think maybe right here in the middle, just right here in this middle section, just kind of sprinkle a bunch of black dye in here and let that soak in, and then we will let that fully exhaust, and then we'll put speckles on either side. I don't want to do a lot of speckles because there's not a lot of that color in the logo, but I do want to put enough that you can recognize the color. So let's go ahead and put the black in and go from there. Another note, if you've never done any dyeing before, working with dry acid powder can be very, very hazardous to your lungs. So do not try this without wearing a mask. Just a little warning now. So what I'm using here is it's like a tea strainer, and I'm just gonna tap out the dye onto the yarn in the places where I want it to kind of congregate. And that's gonna go on real heavy. Like I want that to be nice and heavy. And actually could use a little more in some spaces. Trying to keep it as even as possible. But sometimes it does spread out. That's okay, it's allowed to spread. If it spreads, I'm okay with that. I kind of just want it to take its own course here. So I've got the black in there, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to let that sit. The citric acid is going to allow this to bond to the yarn relatively quickly, but what I don't want to do is move it before it heat sets, because then it'll spread a little bit more. You know, I really want to let this kind of settle in and absorb to the yarn, because I want this to be nice and full. I can, in some places, if I wanted to, push this down a little bit, make sure that it's kind of evenly spread, but I don't want to move it too much. Just like that. So now, we'll let that sit, and we'll come back in about 25 to 30 minutes and see how this is doing, and then we'll kind of decide where to go from there. Okay, so the black has absorbed into the yarn, and now we are going to add the gold speckles, and we're going to do this very lightly since the logo doesn't have much of this on it, and we're only going to do one side so that it's kind of subtle, but still there. We want it to be kind of representative of what it is we're using as the inspiration. So I'll get this moved over so that you can see where I'm going to do that, and then when we are done with the speckling, I believe we're actually going to be done for this colorway. What I may do is I may layer it with some additional gray just to give it a little depth. We're going to see kind of what it looks like after the speckling. Okay, so got our mask. And I don't need much of this. I'm just gonna lightly Now the only thing about this golden straw color is that it does have a pretty heavy green undertone. So what I may do, if I don't like the way that this comes out is that I may do a chocolate brown over top of it. But again, what I think I may do after the speckle kind of settles, so the green undertone does eventually go away as it's heated, and it does turn into more of a brown color. But what may happen is when I go to add depth with the silver, which I think I am going to do, I'm going to do some depth with the silver gray. What may happen is that helps kind of tone down the green, but we'll see. So we're going to let this sit for a little while, and then we'll come back and do the next part. So as you can see, we've actually settled into a nice golden color, which is actually what I wanted, and it's a really, really beautiful color. So I think I'm actually going to leave it, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lightly put some more gray on the back end and on this front end, just to kind of add a little bit of depth to the gray and remove a little bit of the white. And then I'm just going to let it sit, and it will be done, and we'll just let it cool overnight. So I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, and we are going to get started on that bit here in just a second. Again, always wearing a mask for extra protection. Now what we're going to do with this one is it's very similar to what I did with the black and the gold, except that I am going to use a little bit less dye, and when I sprinkle this on, I'm actually going to try and miss where I've got the gold, and then I'm going to, you know, put it in and spread it around, because I want it to strike in just those areas. So like we'll sprinkle a little there and push it down, a little in here. If there's white space, I'm okay with white space. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to add a little bit of depth to the color. And then we'll do it up here as well. Up here I don't have to be as careful or cautious. Again, I'm okay with white space. I just want to get a little bit of depth here to this color. That actually looks really nice. I really like the way that looks. So what I may do, just to kind of make sure that that gold sticks out nicely, is I'm going to just do a little bit more in the same places that I had it previous. Just keeps the depth up, adds a little bit more depth to the color. So now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn the heat down, because it's starting to boil and we don't want boiling. We're just going to let that sit for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we're going to turn the heat off and let it cool overnight, and then we'll take it out and see how everything looks.